Hello and welcome to my channel. In this one I'm going to do a graphite pencil drawing of an otter, and this one is also going to be done on the UART sanded paper, so I want to experiment with graphite pencils on this surface. So if you've been following my channel, you know that the previous two drawings I think were done in colored pencil, and I used this same surface. So this time I want to see how it works with graphite, because it can work with graphite, I mean, why not? So this time I'm going to use Faber Castell graphite pencils, and I'm going to use two types, the matte graphite pencils and the regular or conventional graphite pencils. The matte graphite pencils are Faber Castell Pit Graphite matte pencils. They're relatively new, they've been on the market for only a couple of years I think. And I've already done a review on those. As for the regular Faber Castell 9000 graphite pencils, they're already an established brand. I've been using them also for quite a bit, and they're also really good graphite pencils. The difference between the matte and the regular graphite pencils is that the regular graphite pencils create graphite shine. Normally they do, but not always, as you will see. And matte graphite pencils, they don't have that graphite shine, and they tend to be a little bit darker, so you can push the range of value a little bit further. Now on this surface I don't even know if I had to use both, because I could just get away with using regular graphite pencils. The reason is because this sanded surface, this rough textured surface, is pretty matte already, so even if you try using regular graphite pencil on it, you will see that there is no graphite shine. There is simply no graphite shine, and they look a little bit darker, and they look definitely more matte. So I think this surface may be very interesting when working in graphite. If you don't like working on regular paper, the regular paper has its advantages. Obviously it's a lot cheaper, but there are some other advantages as well, because this one is not perfectly white, this is a little bit yellowish, but it's still a very light paper. You could do some nice graphite pencil drawings on it. But there are some other disadvantages of this surface that I will talk about a bit later. But like I said, graphite, as you can see, does work here. Now let me get back to talking a little bit about the drawing process, and I'll talk about the materials a bit more during the drawing process. So I'm drawing an otter peeping out of a hollow tree or a log. And what I like about this scene or this drawing is the contrast that I will hopefully be able to create between the lighter parts of the otter's body and that darker background of a hollow tree. And now, one of the first things I did, I tried to imitate the texture of a tree bark here, and to make those cracks in the tree bark by using some darker pencils. With lighter pencils, I just drag my pencil like this, and I try to create a bit of a texture that looks like something like a rough tree bark, and occasionally I add slightly more deliberate marks with a darker pencil, like a 10B, and for those darker areas I use a 14B. So these matte graphite pencils give me more options when it comes to creating some really dark values, but once again, if you wanted to work just in regular graphite pencils, you would actually barely tell the difference, because on this surface even regular graphite pencils are pretty matte. The only way that you could create graphite shine on this surface is you would really have to use more pressure, and you would really have to try to saturate the paper, burnish it by using darker or softer pencil over and over again on the same area, and you usually wouldn't. There usually wouldn't be a need to do that. Now I'm starting to work a little bit on this fur on the top of the back and the texture. I'm trying to imitate that texture of the fur, and when you're drawing fur, you normally want to pay attention to the length of the fur and the direction of the fur, and you want to try to match the length and the direction of the fur with the length and the direction of your strokes. So Here the fur won't be super detailed, but I will try to put in some details. It's a slightly smaller drawing this time. Anyway, I'm starting to work on the eyes here, and the eyes are mostly going to appear dark, with the exception of this nice catch light here near the top, and I'm going to reserve that lighter space and work around it with one of my darkest pencils. That's the 14B, and I'm going to refine the appearance of both the eye and the catch light by using blending tools a little bit later. As for the mouth, I'm drawing a bit of an interrupted line there because the line is mostly going to be interrupted by lighter hairs and whiskers. I don't know if those are called whiskers, but I suppose they are because they kind of look like a cat's whiskers. So I'm refining the eyes a little bit with a tortillon, and I am using a tortillon as a blending tool, but for the most part I will be using brushes. Brushes are more useful here, but tortillons have their role as well. For erasing, as you can tell, I'm mostly using a kneaded eraser, and I mostly use a Faber Castell kneaded eraser or a kneadable eraser, whatever you want to call it. And the reason for that is because on this surface, erasing can be a little bit tricky. What I found when I worked in colored pencils on the previous two drawings was that it's actually relatively easy to erase. However, with graphite is a little bit more of a lubricant. It has a little bit more of that binder which can stick to the surface of the paper and lubricate it so that it's difficult to lift up or remove the material. So using regular erasers could be a problem. That's why gently lifting up can achieve better results. But even that has its own limits sometimes. But generally I think that erasing, as long as you're careful, shouldn't be that much of a problem on this surface, especially if you're not pressing hard or putting down much of the material. Anyway, one of the disadvantages with kneaded erasers is that you have to keep reshaping them or remolding them, because otherwise they won't do their job. And this is especially the case on this surface because it picks up so much of that material so quickly, and it just stops erasing. So you need to clean it up by reshaping it and by remolding it into a new, either a teardrop shape or a blade-like shape. So I'm doing some more work, this time with a lighter pencil, drawing some of the lighter fur on the parts of the head which are more exposed to the light source, drawing those shorter hairs, trying to imitate the appearance of shorter fur on the head. Once again, you want to try to match the length of the fur with the length of your strokes. I don't know how much all of these will remain visible because I will be doing a little bit of blending on top of that, but some of those marks always do remain. So you want to lay down that texture. That will eventually, hopefully, look good. But once I do start blending, once this process is done, and this process requires a little bit of patience, as you can see, because I need to draw a bunch of these shorter marks to try to imitate the length of the fur, and they do get a little bit longer as you move away from the head towards the neck and the chest and the back area, because obviously the hair varies in length in different parts of the body. Once I lay that down, once I laid that texture down, and once I do some work with the brushes like I'm doing here, the fur will appear softer and more dense. So that's what the blending tools do when you're drawing hair or fur. They create that illusion of volume and density. So when you're drawing animal fur, you can't draw every single hair. And it's the same thing when you're drawing human hair. You can't draw every single hair. So in order to create that illusion, like there are lots of hairs, you want to use your blending tools. That softens the marks and makes them look a little bit less like lines and more like a bunch of smaller hairs. And it also makes the fur look denser, but also fluffier, softer a little bit. So blending is very useful. And in addition to the brushes that I use, I also like to use tortillons, but tortillons are used in a slightly different way for smaller, more deliberate marks. Because you can see how I'm dabbing on some of these marks here, softening some of them, but at the same time creating some smaller, softer marks, because tortillon is not merely a blending tool, it's also a drawing tool, because when it picks up a little bit of that material, you can also make some marks with it as you would with a pencil. So the difference is that these marks are a lot softer, they have softer edges, and they're lighter, and that can be an advantage sometimes, because sometimes you don't really want such clean edges and such definite marks. Sometimes you want slightly softer, less defined marks. Anyway, I'm working around the body now, drawing some darker areas here, because now to the right of the head and around the feet, because I'm trying to create that contrast. So as I've already mentioned, the idea is to create contrast between the main subject and that hollow darker shape of that tree or tree trunk, and that way the main subject would stand out because of that contrast. Now, as for the feet there, I wasn't really sure what to do with them. Couldn't really make out the shapes properly in my reference, so I will end up reworking them, but in this stage I just sort of wanted to focus on other things. I did a little bit of work on the fur here at the bottom and softened that with a tortillon and tried to define those little toes as best as I could, but like I said, I wasn't initially particularly happy with how that turned out. And I used my kneaded eraser to try to clean up the edges of the head to the right, because that's where you want to create the most contrast. As for the size of the paper, I think I forgot to mention that I buy this paper in very large rolls because it's cheaper for me that way. So it's a UART 800 sanded paper. This time it's an artist quality sanded paper, and I cut it into smaller pieces, and this one is about 7 times 10 inches or so, I think. So it's not a very small piece, but it's not very large either. It's a little bit smaller than what I normally do. And I deliberately picked the 800 grit or the 800 grade because it's finer and smoother than the other ones, and because I'm going to be doing most of the work with media other than pastel, I'm going to want something less toothy and a little bit more fine. But I am planning to do some work with pastel pencils on this one mostly. I plan to do mostly landscapes, and we'll see how that will work. I find this surface very interesting. I've already done many drawings on fine sandpaper that you can buy in a hardware store, and that's very similar to what I'm using here. But this artist quality sanded paper is supposed to offer some additional advantages. One of the advantages is the fact that it's of lighter color. That it looks, well, not completely white, but it's very light, and I can just, if I want, I can just do regular portraits on it, and the yellowish color will just sort of give them that aged look, maybe a little bit, if you want to create that effect intentionally. I drew some grass here at the bottom by using a kneaded eraser, and I used that darker area of darker value to create contrast, and simply erased those marks to indicate that there are some blades of grass in front of that log by working on top of that darker area and removing the graphite. So I'm continuing to draw some nice texture and some nice details, like imitating the cracks on that broken tree. Every now and then I create a little bit more deliberate marks, some slightly larger cracks, but sometimes I just sort of drag my pencil and allow it to create some random texture to imitate the appearance of wood or tree bark, whichever it is. So as you can see, it's going to be like a hollow tree trunk, and the otter's head will be sticking out of it. So it's a very simple but interesting scene, I think. I've already done one drawing of an otter before, but that was a long time ago now. That was when I was just beginning to work on YouTube. That was, I think, back in 2018, so 6 years ago. And that one was a little bit simpler in terms of the background, because it was just the otter, I think, not much else. But the otter itself was a little bit larger, and the drawing was a little bit larger. That's why I had to focus on the otter's fur a little bit more. So that aspect of the drawing was a little bit more complex and detailed. I'm using the kneaded eraser here, as you can tell, to draw some of these whiskers, and not really trying to force it. I'm just drawing as much as I can, trying to make those lighter marks where possible. This will require a little bit of patience and a lot of reshaping and remolding of that kneaded eraser. It doesn't have to be perfect, it doesn't have to be super realistic. With a few suggestions of whiskers here and there, it's usually enough for the eye of the viewer to be happy. This inner side of the tree to the right of the otter is a little bit more rough and a bit more corrugated as it appears on the inside. So I'm using a pencil eraser now to try to imitate that appearance of that corrugated surface, and also to throw in a few lighter details around the edges here and there as well. So I don't know, maybe it's not going to be a super detailed or a super impressive drawing, but like I said, I just wanted to see what graphite can do on this surface, and I can say that it didn't perform bad at all. It does work. I'm not really sure if this surface would be my go-to choice when working with graphite, but there is that advantage that there is simply no graphite shine. So if you don't like graphite shine, you might want to give this surface a try. If you want it to appear completely white, maybe you can just tone it with a bit of white watercolor. But you know, it's fine this way as well. I'm drawing some grass and a little bit more shadow here at the bottom, and I'm going to soften that a little bit with a brush to create two effects, both to make the grass appear a little bit more dense, but also to make it look a little bit less detailed, maybe a little bit more out of focus, because I don't want it to be too distracting. I want the otter itself to be the most detailed part of the drawing, so that the viewer can immediately focus on that. I'm drawing some more lighter blades of grass at the bottom, and now at the top, just to, I don't know, sort of complete the scene, maybe I'm going to add some foliage here at the top to the right, like maybe there are some lower hanging branches or trees there, or maybe some bushes behind that log. I'm going to soften that with a brush as well, so that it wouldn't have too much texture and so that it wouldn't be too distracting. And now, as you can see, I'm doing a bit of refining with the kneaded eraser, because the drawing is almost done. I'll put my signature on the left side, and I'm just going to put down some finishing touches, do a little bit more refining. Let me know what you think in the comments. I hope you like it. Check out my other videos, and don't forget to subscribe. Now, if you want to see longer videos, this is what the drawing looks like when it's finished. If you want to see longer videos and more content, you should check out my Patreon. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'm going to see you in the next one. Bye bye.